Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone from Woodside Park and from across the world that are joining us for this very, very special, unique occasion. We are delighted to be joined by Eli Beer. Good evening, Eli. Can you hear us?
I hear you loud and clear, straight from Yerushalayim.
Beautiful, beautiful. Nowhere better, nowhere better. So just for those that may not be familiar, although I think it's almost an impossibility, such as Eli's fame and the fact that he is admired around the world, let me share with you a very brief introduction before we have a conversation with Eli. So Eli is the founder of the United Hatzalah of Israel. He's the president of the US-based organization Friends of United Hatzalah. Now, Hatzalah, United Hatzalah of Israel, is an independent, non-profit, fully volunteer emergency medical service organization that provides fast and free emergency medical first response throughout Israel. Elis has made an extraordinary contribution to Israel and to the society as a whole, and he's been recognized for countless awards, from the Social Entrepreneur of the Year Award, the Presidential Award, and the Victor Goldberg Prize for Peace in the Middle East, amongst many, many others. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to invite Eli to share with us some thoughts. We're going to ask him a few questions along the way. But first and foremost, Eli, good evening. We are really, truly delighted to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
I'm really excited to be with you. I miss the community in London and your community, and I can't wait to be there in person, but this is the best I could do for now, and it's really nice to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So my curiosity is always, if you're happy to tell us a bit about your background, your family, where you grew up, how you grew up, and how you get to where you today, kind of.
Well, I grew up here in Jerusalem. My parents made Aliyah from the United States in the late 60s, right after the Six-Day War. So I was born here right before the Yom Kippur War. When I was a young boy, I experienced a terrible experience. I was 6 years old and I saw a bus blow up in my neighborhood right next to my school. And it was a Friday afternoon right before Shabbat. This is the first bomb attack on a bus. And that's really where my life shifted me to. I remember people injured and screaming for help, and people were killed. And I was just a child. But I remember people, were just needed help. And the taxi drivers came with their own cabs, and they pushed them into their taxi and took them to the hospitals. And I couldn't understand why, I was very, very bothered. And I grew up saying, I want to save lives one day. And that's all I was thinking about during my years of growing up in Yerushalayim.
Wow.
Wow. So where are you living today, Eli, if we may ask?
I live on the Elal Plain.
Which row?
That's why my kids always call me Avinu Shebashamayim, because I'm always flying. I live in Jerusalem, in Ramot, which is in the outskirts of Yerushalayim, right as you come in.
Very
beautiful, nice community, and I travel a lot, but my base is here. My hub is here.
Right. I can testify that it's a lovely. My brother and sister-in-law live in Ramot, so lovely neighborhood. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So Eli, how long have you been at the helm of United Hatzalah in Israel?
So I was lucky enough to be, the year when it started. I was 16 years old when I got this started with my friends. It just started as a small initiative. It wasn't a plan to be what it is today. We just we were very bothered that it took an ambulance so long to get to emergencies. I started volunteering in the back of an ambulance when I was almost 15. And I used to go once a week on a shift in the back of an ambulance, and I loved it. I used to write down every emergency, what time I used to watch, what time we received it and what time we arrived. And I used to make the calculations of average response time. And I realized after being a year and a half and almost 2 years in the back of an ambulance that we helped many, many people. But our average response time was over 17 minutes. And when someone was not breathing, by the time we got there, it was too late. And once and again, over and over, we used to get to heart attacks, really bad heart attacks, and people in car accidents. And by the time we got there, it was too late, and they had to sign a death certificate. And then when I was 16 and a half years old, we got called for a 7-year-old boy who choked from a hot dog. And I was in the back of an ambulance. The driver was driving really quick, crossing Jerusalem. And it took us 21 minutes to get to this child. And by the time we got there, the kid was in a really bad situation. The mother was hysterical and crying, "Please save my son." And we were doing CPR, trying to save him while we were crying. And a doctor who lived a block away comes to help us because he saw the ambulance parked downstairs. And after 20 or 30 minutes, he said there was nothing we could do, just bring a sheet to cover him. That moment, I was 16 and a half years old. It was the worst moment of my life when we had to sign a death certificate on this child, while I knew a doctor lived a block away, but he didn't know this kid is suffocating for death. And I didn't understand then. I realized something is wrong with the system. The ambulance system is working in a wrong way, because when someone calls for help, the ambulance is always the first one to come, but always too late. Why don't we get the neighbor that's a doctor, or who's a shoemaker, who's a EMT, or the nurse living nearby, get alerted and getting them to come way before the ambulance? And that's how we started this idea. We said, let's break into the system. Let's change the system. Let's do a revolution in the ambulance system in Israel.
It's incredible, because we are passionate about community also, and it sounds like you've taken the community one step further, and you've really mobilized all the talents within. Because do you need to have a medical background to be part of Hatzalah, or can it be anybody can volunteer?
The idea is you need to have a good heart. So you need to have a good heart. We'll train you. We'll make sure you know what you need to know. You do a whole EMT course, emergency medical technician course, and you become a professional lifesaver. And then you continue being a rabbi, continue being a lawyer, continue being a plumber, continue being a student, yeshiva boy, whatever you do, just continue doing, and we'll alert you if someone nearby who needs help. We're going to be like the life-saving Uber, way before Uber. This is I'm talking about. I was 16 and a half years old, which was 2.5 years ago. So we actually did this almost 30 years ago. And this was the idea of v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, like really in the best essence of like v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Your neighbor who needs help, a bypass who needs help, a Jewish person, a secular, a non-Jewish person, a religious person, a secular, anyone who needs help will be there in 90 seconds.
Wow. That's astonishing. Unbelievable. Eli, tell us about the transformation, where we are today with Hatzalah, and where we were when you picked up the baton, as it were. Where are we? And where are we now? What's the transformation, and where are we going to be in 10 years' time?
So we were 15 volunteers when we started. We would respond to about 3-4 emergencies a day in our neighborhood. Now we have 6,500 volunteers, and we respond to almost 2,000 emergencies a day. Our response time now is 3 minutes nationwide in Israel, and in some cities we're under 90 seconds, which is unheard of. In cities like Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and others, we have volunteers who are ready to jump out of anything they do on ambucycles, these motorcycle ambulances. That we were the first ones in the world to create this, which made no sense to me that they didn't have it before. Like, think about it. You could call an ambulance and call for a pizza. The pizza would come faster than the ambulance because they came by motorcycle.
Yes.
So I said, why don't we do the same and get motorcycles to save lives? So we actually got the ambucycle idea, and we were the first ones in the world actually to think of putting a defibrillator, medical equipment in the back of the box that we have, and we put a siren above it, and the volunteer is allocated specifically to that ambucycle, and that volunteer would respond to calls because he's always with it. He takes it to work, he goes to synagogue with it, he goes to wherever he goes. That volunteer is always with that defibrillator, with that and recycle.
And where are we going, Eli? Where can you see us? Is it drones? Where are we going to be in 10 years with Hatzalah?
We have a lot of surprises coming up. I mean, I'll say one surprise is coming from England soon. I promise to share it with you first. It's going to be a really nice idea that's developed with some Jewish fellows in England, and we're going to do it here in Israel hopefully soon. But the idea of really, it's a very simple idea, getting enough people everywhere to get a 90-second response everywhere in the country, meaning that we would never have someone laying there for more than a minute and a half, not breathing.
Right.
That's when you could still save that person and save the quality of life, meaning no brain damage, no damage to kidneys or lungs or heart. And you could go back to a functioning life afterwards. Think about a mother or a father who, after waiting for 7 minutes for an ambulance, and if they're lucky and saved, if they're lucky and get there in 7 minutes, they have brain damage. How could the family function afterwards? So the idea is using volunteers who have the most passionate, they want to do good. They don't get paid. They get the satisfaction. They don't need to get paid, so they can get there fast enough. They don't think twice. 3 o'clock in the morning, they'll jump out of bed with pajamas and run to save the neighbor or some random person they don't know. And that's the best life-saving you could do.
Actually, you just reminded me 2 o'clock in the morning. I think that when we were living in Israel, when we had Rafael, our second child, and I think we actually used the services of Hatzalah on a Friday night. We lived on the 6th floor, and for some reason, the neighbors had switched off the elevator. And 2 Hatzalah people, how you can just imagine the scene, taking me down 6th floor. I think I gave birth nearly in the ambulance. But they got us to the hospital very quick on a Friday night in Hanover.
I'll tell you what, yeah, and I want to tell you something. The idea of Friday night, it's the best day to save lives. I'll tell you why. The secret. This is between me and the rabbi. Then we leave you with the dishes, so we run out to save lives.
That's it.
So that means, Eli, since you were
my wife now is a volunteer at Hatzalah too, so she runs out and leaves me with the dishes.
She runs out and leaves you with the dishes. So I guess if there's anything we've got with our son, since they were the ones that delivered or helped deliver, we can come back. Money back guarantee.
Give you a lifetime guarantee and a free service forever.
You were speaking a lot about a good heart. You know, anybody with a good heart to volunteer, and your volunteers, your 6,500 volunteers. You've been doing this for 30 years. What motivates you? What keeps you going?
I'll tell you, every single day, I think it's my first day. I can't even describe to you seeing a text message I get from a volunteer who thanks me for allowing him to save people's lives. And he tells me a story that he just saved someone, a child, an adult, some person that he did a Heimlich maneuver to someone, and he saved that person. And they thank me for doing it. I don't have to work anymore. Now I'm just on dividends. I don't have to personally do CPR like I used to. Now I have 6,500 people doing it for me. And it's just amazing to see every single day. I get hundreds of messages thanking me by people who were saved, people who were helped, and volunteers who feel lucky enough to say, Eli, thank you for and I say to them, thank you for joining in. It's like a family, and it just every single day when I go to United Hatzalah headquarters in Jerusalem, we actually had a nice group of English people visit today who live in Herzliya, and they came to Jerusalem and they were fascinated. Asaf Admoni brought them over to visit Hatzalah. He's in Israel now, and they said they never, in their wild minds, never thought of something incredible like this. And I see it every day, and for me, it's just reading the stories coming out of the field is enough.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, the feedback that you've mentioned and the feedback that that we've heard about people that have experienced and benefited firsthand from your incredible organization. But every organization, and the bigger the organization, the more the headaches, the more the hassles. Do you ever find yourself coming up against brick walls or having a day where you think, oh, I can't anymore. It's, you know, it's so much on my shoulders. You're flying every day. You miss, you know, you're not with your family. It can't be easy.
Look, Israel is a country that's bureaucracy is part of our culture. You know, every Israeli thinks he's smarter than the other Israeli, and it's very hard to win in Israel. But whenever I'm stuck with the brick walls, and I used to have a lot of brick walls, I could tell you the ambulance organization that I used to volunteer for did not like the idea when we started responding to calls. They said it's ours because they used to go the union, you know, they used to run control the organization, and everyone really had to pay for service. You know, you couldn't get a free ride to the hospital. So when you used to come as volunteers, many times people felt better by the time we came and treated them. So then when the ambulance arrived, they didn't have to go to the hospital. So they actually did not like the fact that we are coming into emergencies of theirs. So they didn't want to share their emergency with us. So we had to use some Israeli innovation called chutzpah. And we bought police scanners. I don't know if you know what police scanners are, but in America, it's like a walkie-talkie. That you could listen into the police and listen into the fire and ambulances. So we used to hear their emergency, and that's how he knew something is happening nearby. And that's how we jumped and grabbed the emergency, and we knew what was going on. They didn't know we were listening into their emergency calls.
Wow.
We were young and we weren't scared, and we said, okay, we have a brick wall. They don't want to share calls with us. Because we offered our services to them. We said, we are a group of young people who want to come help you. And they said, no, thank you. So we had to break into the system.
Right.
And that's how we heard about emergency calls. And that's how we knew when a lady needed help, someone needs help, whatever it is, we were there. Wow. And eventually we grew and more people joined us. The first person I saved was a man 70 years old who was hit by a car in Beit Vagan. And I heard the emergency on this walkie-talkie, and I ran there by foot. It took me 30 seconds. I got there. I was 16 and a half years old. I'm holding the walkie-talkie in one hand. I had no medical supplies in me, and the guy was bleeding terribly from his neck. And I had no way of stopping his bleeding. I had no bandages, so I took my yarmulke off my head. And I used this as a tourniquet, as a bandage, and I just pushed it in as much as I could just to stop his bleeding. And I pushed it in until I saw it stop bleeding. And then eventually the ambulance came, took him to the hospital. I didn't know if he'll survive. And 2 days later, they called me up and someone says, are you Eli Beer? And I said, yes. He says, my father woke up this morning in Hadassah Hospital. You saved his life.
Wow.
And I couldn't believe it. It's the first time I saved a life. And I was like a year and a half in the back of an ambulance. I never felt that feeling of saving someone. Yeah. So I went to visit him and he gave me that incredible hug and thanked me for saving him. And then I realized he had a number on his hand. And that changed my life forever. And I can tell you, every single time I feel that same feeling when I hear someone was saved, no matter who it is. And that's how we started, from nothing, from a walkie-talkie and a yarmulke. Now we have real medical supplies. We don't.
I'm happy to hear that.
But you're speaking about volunteers. I think it's important for the listeners to know and the viewers to know that it's very, very diverse, your volunteers. We're talking about from all faiths, all denominations, right? It's not just Jewish volunteers, is it?
We have Avraham, and we have Ibrahim, and Muhammad, and Moshe, and Yael, and Sarah. We have women, men, religious Jews, ultra-religious Jews, secular Jews, men and women, of course, and Arabs and Druze and Christians. All together, we have 6,500 volunteers. 550 volunteers who are Arabs in United Hatzalah. And that's why we call it United Hatzalah. It's our symbol, sorry. And we just uniting everyone to save people. Hatzalah means save, rescue. So I get people stop me all the time. And like, I just went to New York a couple of weeks ago. And I called a taxi in the middle of the night, like a get taxi here in Israel. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, I had to be in the airport at 4. And an Arab taxi driver comes and he comes out and he says in Hebrew, but I right away he heard the accent. He says, I'm so honored to drive you. I said, you know me? He says, I'm a volunteer of yours. And he opens the back trunk and I sell like defibrillator and kit. And then he said to me, my brother's a volunteer, and my cousin's a volunteer, and the whole village, no, we are the Hatzalah volunteers.
Amazing.
It's such a great feeling to know that, we are connecting people here in Israel to something that they really believe in, saving lives.
Is it okay if we move a bit to your personal story now, if that's okay? Because your whole life, I didn't realize it was since you were 6. Your whole life has been about saving lives, and you almost lost your life due to COVID. Are you happy to share with the viewers your story?
Of course, it was my worst experience in my life. It was a very bad experience saying goodbye to my children. I was in a hospital all alone in Miami. I didn't feel well, and I ended up in a hospital because I couldn't breathe. I was one of the first patients in Florida who was on a ventilator. The doctor said to me, Eli, we have no choice. We have to put you on a coma, induce you into coma, and take you and just put you on a coma. And it was a very bad experience, and I actually felt like this is it. I don't have any chance of survival. I asked him, what's my chances? He says, we don't know yet, but in Europe, in Spain, and other places like Italy, 5% chance of survival. And I ended up 1 month in a coma on a respirator. And it was a very, very hard experience for me. I mean, I was sure I'm never going to wake up. This is in March last year.
Yeah.
2020, March 2020, right after Purim.
Yeah.
And you came out of the coma after Pesach, right? You missed Pesach completely, is that right?
I was so depressed when I woke up. I heard Pesach was over because I went to the hospital right after Purim, and I didn't expect, if I survived, probably a few days in a coma. I didn't think a month. Yeah. And right before I went right before they intubated me and to put me into coma, I actually sent a video to everyone saying goodbye, and I said goodbye to my children. And I asked everyone to continue supporting United Hatzalah and other great causes. I said, this is more important than ever, you support, even if it's hard, because I was afraid if I die, a lot of people will stop supporting because they know me and the connection and everything.
Yeah.
And when I woke up, I couldn't believe. First of all, it was a day after Pesach. I missed Pesach with my family. I never missed a holiday with my family. I travel all around, but always back for the holidays. And I couldn't move. I couldn't walk. I was in a really bad situation for just, I lost 36 pounds in 1 month.
Wow.
But you're back to yourself.
Thank God, back to myself. And it's totally because of all the great deeds that everyone did. And I want to say something, like, I beg people not only to daven for me, but please do something extra in chesed. The doctor who was treating me asked me, what can I do for you? I said, pray for me. He says, I'm an atheist. I said, you know what? I can hardly talk. I said to him, listen, do chesed. He said, what is chesed? He's not Jewish. I said, chesed is a good deed for someone that you are doing extra, like not just a regular, a little extra effort. So he said, okay, I'll do that. And when I woke up, he came back to me a few days later, and he came to visit me, and he said, you should just know that I prayed for you also. I did good deeds, and I prayed for you, and now I believe in God after you woke up. He said, I didn't think you're going to survive this. And I really believe that I survived this because of all the great deeds people are doing all around the world. And I have to share one little thing with you about one good deed that someone did for me. And I think I survived because of him. When I woke up, I was depressed, and I heard a story from Eli Pollack, who's in Israel, a volunteer. He's the head of volunteer in Israel. And he says to me, Eli, you have to come back to see what we did for you. I said, what did you do for me? He says, we started doing not only emergency calls that we always do, we started doing humanitarian work. A lot of elderly people were locked down for weeks, and they had no way of shopping or getting supplies or whatever they need. So they didn't know who to turn to. So we opened a hotline call United Hatzalah for anything you need. We'll do it for you. And we asked the volunteers to do extra help, extra chesed, like you asked for in honor of you. So I said, tell me one story. And he said, when 5 minutes before Pesach, a woman, 90-year-old, calls and she says, I need desperately help. And they said, what's your emergency? She says, I need candles to light for Passover.
Wow.
I don't have candles. I have no candles to light. I didn't realize. I didn't go shopping for a few weeks. And they said, what about food? Do you have food? She says, I don't need food. Just give me candles. I need candles to save me. So they send out the call, and a volunteer by the name of Ibrahim Ayuti, an Arab Muslim volunteer of United Hatzalah from Jaffa, jumped on his ambucycle that he drives around saving lives, and he drove to the nearest open supermarket when everything was closed, a little supermarket there. And he bought candles, and he saw flowers, and he bought a little bouquet of flowers, and he drove over to Bat Yam, the city nearby, and he goes up to the top floor of a building, and this lady opens the door, old lady and tiny lady, and she sees him with the orange vest, and she says, did you bring the candles? He says, yes, and he hands it over, and she says, you saved my life, you saved my life. And he gave her the flowers. She was so happy, she was crying, and he sees she's a Holocaust survivor. He saw her number. And he says to her, could I sit with you for a few minutes? And she says, you don't want to go back to your family for the Seder? She said, no, I'm not Jewish. I don't have a Seder. And he sat with her for 2.5 hours. And she told him her whole life story. So he asked her, what did you mean when you said, I saved your life? I just gave you candles. What's the big deal? And she said to him, when I was a young girl living in Poland, I was in a concentration camp. And I never missed 1 week lighting something. I used to take a piece of wood, dry potato peel, or something, and light it for even a few seconds, a piece of paper, just to light something for Shabbat or Chag. And then I moved to Israel after the Holocaust. I was the only survivor in my family. And I came to Israel, and I lit candles for every week for my whole family. I had 15 candles lighting. And this week I'm already a few weeks in this COVID lockdown, and I didn't realize I don't have enough candles at home for my whole family. And I said, if I have to go light paper again, this is my last day of my life. She said to him, Ibrahim, you saved my life by bringing me this candles, because otherwise I wouldn't survive this. And he started crying, and he didn't realize how powerful it is. So I told Eli Pollack, I want to speak to him. I was very weak. I said, I want to speak to him. And he was shocked that I'm talking to him when I woke up. And he told me the story. And I said, Ibrahim, what made you volunteer in United Hatzalah? He said, 7 years ago, I was in a terrible truck accident. I was a truck driver. And gasoline was leaking on me. The truck was upside down. And I felt like my death is coming. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, 2 Jewish guys with orange jackets came and saved my life. And I realized afterwards, I found out who they are, and I thanked them, and I realized they're volunteers. They don't get paid for it. So I decided to be one of them. Wow. And I see many people already, and they accepted me like I'm part of the family. And he said to me, I helped so many people. I saved so many people, but I never felt so special by saving this old Holocaust survivor.
Wow.
Wow. Wow, it's like a story you read in the books, but you're telling it to us firsthand. It's just
chills, unbelievable.
And that's how I got my strength to come back to Israel. I was so weak. But I said, if I had the zechut that an Arab volunteer did chesed because of my request to save my life, I succeeded in United Hatzalah. And this is a mission that everyone connects to. And a big Kiddush Hashem. And it's a tikkun olam, like a real kiddush Hashem. And I said, I have to come back to Israel. And I came. I don't know if you saw the video when I landed in Israel.
We did. A royal welcome, a well-deserved royal welcome.
I saw it. Yeah, unbelievable.
I thought it was my funeral, by the way.
It was very emotional. I
actually was pinching myself in the tuchus to see if I'm alive. It doesn't make sense. It looks like a whole funeral here.
Yeah. It was very emotional and very much alive. I have one last question for you. I'm always, we work with a lot of young people. We have young children and teenagers. What message? I'm listening to you. You had a dream when you were 6, and look at what you've accomplished. if there's one message that we can give young people to be able to make a difference, not necessarily your difference, but a difference, what would you tell them?
Don't let anyone discourage you from succeeding with your missions, with your dreams, with your ideas. Many people will say, stupid, that's crazy, don't do it, it's too hard. It's, like what I had when I was a child, coming to Magen David Adom, and they said, no, it's not a good idea, don't do it, we don't allow you. Just go for it. If you really believe in this mission, don't let anyone, like you said, the brick walls. If you see a brick wall, find a path around it, climb above it, find a window. You'll always succeed if you really believe in the mission and fight for it, because otherwise it's never nothing is easy to start. You know yourself when you started what you're doing now. Nothing is easy, and a lot of people just want to discourage you from succeeding, or just would never tell you, great idea, fight for it. And I'm telling you, you should fight for it. You young people, you have a lot of great ideas, especially when it comes to good missions. If it's a bad mission, give up now. But if it's a good mission, don't give up and just do it and fight for it.
Unbelievable. Eli, I want to thank you on behalf of the Woodside Park community in London and all of the viewers and listeners that are joining us this evening to watch, to admire, and to be inspired by your outstanding example. You don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk, you lead by example. And we hope and pray that you continue your incredible work, both in Israel and outside Israel. And we give you an open invitation to come to us with a red carpet. We'll put out the red carpet for you. But seriously, we look forward to continuing our conversation with you. You should know that there have been in the background conversations about Hatzalah in our neighborhood. And please God, with your encouragement and your advice, I'm sure it's something that we'll be able, in the fullness of time, to move forwards. But for the time being, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you, Eli.
Thank you.
Tremendous love to all of you and all the people in England and around the world, everyone in England and the Jewish community and non-Jewish community. I feel so bad of what England suffered for such a long time. And I just wish everyone a full recovery, whoever's sick, no one else gets sick, and go back to normal life. And long life for the Queen, like we say.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us. Good night. Thank you so much.
Bye.
All the very best.
All the best.
Good night, Eli.
Bye.